Billionaire finds a poor little girl crying at his son's grave. But when she says, "I need to tell you something, sir, your son," the moment he hears it, he falls to his knees and starts crying. A chilly autumn wind stirred the dry leaves scattered across the cemetery as Warren Hale passed through the iron gates. Holding a bouquet of lilies in his hand, he walked the familiar path with heavy steps. An entire year of visiting this place every week, and the pain hadn't lessened. It wasn't supposed to lessen, he thought. It was his punishment. As he approached Tyson's grave, Warren noticed something unusual. A small figure was kneeling at the marble headstone, crying. A child. She wore a faded light blue coat with patches on the elbows and was softly speaking to the cold stone, as though it could answer. Warren stopped a few feet away, uncertain. He had never encountered anyone there before, much less a little girl. For a moment, he considered coming back later, but something kept him in place. Maybe it was curiosity about who else, other than him, would visit his son. "I brought another drawing today," the girl was saying, placing a colorful piece of paper against the headstone. "It's from that day at the park, when you showed me how to climb that big tree, remember?" Warren took a step forward, the dry leaves crackling under his feet. The girl turned, startled. She had brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and large, attentive eyes. She looked very young, probably around the same age Tyson had been. She didn't seem scared, just surprised. "I'm sorry," Warren said. "I didn't mean to interrupt." The girl studied him for a moment, tilting her head slightly to the side. "You're Mr. Hale, right?" "Tyson's dad." Warren felt a knot in his throat. It had been so long since anyone linked him to his son. At work, people avoided mentioning Tyson, as if the name were a contagious disease. "Yes, I am," he answered, taking another step closer. "And you are—" Jenna Marsh." She gave a small smile. "I used to play with Tyson at the park. We were friends." Warren placed the lilies beside the headstone, noticing other small items already there. A painted rock, a colored feather, some improvised little toys, offerings that weren't from him. "Do you come here often?" he asked, kneeling on the opposite side of the grave. "Whenever I can," Jenna replied, pulling at the sleeves of her coat, which seemed too long for her small arms. "I come to talk to him, tell him what's going on at the park." Warren looked at the drawing Jenna had brought. A big tree, two small children in its branches, simple smiles drawn with well-worn colored pencils. "Did you two play together a lot?" "Every day at the park near his house," Jenna replied. "We made up stories, climbed trees, played superhero." Warren fell silent for a moment, thinking about this part of his son's life he hadn't known, a friendship that must have been important, yet he had never seen it firsthand. "Tyson." He hesitated, his voice dropping. "Did he ever talk about me?" Jenna looked directly at Warren, her wide eyes serious and honest. "He did. He said you worked a lot, like a whole lot, that you almost never had time for him." Her words hit Warren like a physical blow. He felt the air rush out of his lungs. It was true, of course. There was always something more important, a project, a meeting, a client, always something that kept him away from home, away from his son. "I see," he murmured, lowering his head. "But," Jenna continued, "he also said he loved you more than anything, that you were his superhero." Warren lifted his gaze, surprised. "Superhero?" Jenna nodded, now looking excited. "He said you built giant buildings, so tall they touched the sky. That you built bridges across huge rivers, and that one day you two would work together to build the prettiest city in the world." Warren went still, her words piercing his heart like arrows. "He said that. All the time. He had a box full of newspaper clippings about you. Whenever something new came out, he'd cut it out and keep it. He showed everyone at the park." Warren felt his entire body start to tremble. Tyson collected articles about him. He never knew. He never asked. He had always assumed his son wasn't interested in his work, maybe even resented him for always being away. "There was one time," Jenna went on, "he got sad because you couldn't go to his soccer game at school. But then he said it was okay, that you were saving the world in your own way." Warren felt his knees buckle. He couldn't stand anymore. He sank onto the cemetery grass, his legs folding beneath him, He said he wasn't mad, Warren asked in a choked voice. No, he said, my dad is kinda like Superman. He can't be everywhere at once, but he's always doing something important. That was too much for Warren. Something inside him simply gave way, like a dam that breaks under too much pressure. The tears he hadn't been able to shed for so long now poured freely. A sob escaped his throat, then another, and soon he was crying openly, his body shaking with the force of his sorrow. Warren covered his face with both hands, unable to control the tsunami of emotions washing over him. How could his son have seen him this way? Like a hero, he who had missed so many important moments, who was never there when Tyson truly needed him. Jenna watched in silence, unafraid of his reaction. After a few moments, she stepped closer and, hesitantly, placed her small hand on Warren's shoulder. Tyson said you were strong, she said softly, but that you were still just a man. Warren couldn't speak. Years of guilt, regret, and pent-up pain were finally overflowing. He cried for everything he had lost, for every moment he would never get back, for all the precious time he had squandered in exchange for things that now seemed so worthless. I didn't deserve it, he managed to say at last, between sobs. I didn't deserve for him to think of me like that. Jenna reached into the pocket of her worn-out coat and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I made this drawing for you, she said, handing him the paper. I thought you might like it. With trembling hands, Warren took the paper and unfolded it. 3 figures stood hand in hand, a tall man in a suit, a red-headed boy, and a girl with a ponytail. Above them, in a child's handwriting, were the words, Tyson's family. That was the final blow. Warren clutched the drawing to his chest and let the sobs consume him completely. He didn't care about appearing strong or composed anymore. There was no reason to. I wasn't there, he whispered, words broken by sobs. When he needed me most, I wasn't there. Jenna stayed quiet for a long time, letting Warren cry. When the sobs started to subside, she spoke. Tyson told me something on the last day we played at the park. He said, one day my dad will understand that he doesn't need to build the entire world. Just the part where we can live together. Warren wiped his tears, looking at that small child who somehow managed to convey words that pierced straight into his soul. Thank you, he finally said, voice hoarse from crying, for telling me all this, for showing me how he saw me. Jenna smiled, a small, sad smile. He would have wanted you to know. Warren carefully placed the drawing in the inside pocket of his jacket, near his heart. The sky was growing darker, and the wind was picking up now. It's getting late, Jenna said, glancing at the sky. I should go. Will you come back here? Warren asked, still sitting on the grass, exhausted from his emotional outburst. Every week. She stood up, adjusting her patched coat. We can meet again if you like. Warren nodded, unable to say more. Bye, Mr. Hale, she said, then turned to the headstone. Bye, Tyson. I'll be back next week. Warren watched the small figure walk away along the stone path, her worn-out shoes dragging through the dry leaves. Who was this child? And why had he never known about her before? When he was finally alone, Warren turned back to his son's grave. I wasn't a hero, Tyson, he whispered, voice still shaky. Not even close. But I swear, I'm going to try to be the man you believed I was. The wind rustled the leaves around him, as though the cemetery answered his words. Warren stayed there until sunset, letting the tears come when they would, speaking to his son in a way he never had when the boy was alive. And as night fell, something in him began to change, slowly. It wasn't peace. Peace still seemed too far away, but maybe it was the start of a journey, a chance to finally learn how to become the hero his son had always seen in him. The key turned in the lock with a metallic click that echoed through the empty entryway. Warren pushed the door open and stepped into his house, an elegant, spacious building that, ironically, had never felt like a real home, designed by an award-winning colleague, featured in architecture magazines, yet it had no soul. Like everything else in his life, it was more of an achievement than a refuge. Warren tossed his keys onto the entry table and stood there in the hall, unsure where to go. The house had never seemed so large and so empty at the same time. The silence felt almost tangible, as though the air were too dense for his lungs. You were his superhero. The little girl's words from the cemetery still echoed in his head, like a mantra he couldn't silence, like an accusation. Warren took off his jacket and hung it on the coat rack, his movements mechanical, like a robot programmed to mimic life. He loosened his tie and walked into the spotless kitchen, where he opened the almost empty fridge. He grabbed a bottle of water but didn't drink, just held it, feeling the cold against his palm. He said you worked a lot, like a whole lot, that you almost never had time for him. It was true. How many times had Tyson asked him to play, only for Warren to reply, later? How many school events had he missed because he was in another state or another country, closing some important deal? How many dinners had he spent on the phone, checking emails, drafting designs? Warren set the bottle on the counter and climbed the stairs, pausing in the second-floor hallway. 5 doors opened onto this corridor: his bedroom, his office, 2 guest rooms that never had guests, and the last door, always closed, Tyson's room. Warren walked toward it slowly, as though approaching a cliff's edge. His hand touched the doorknob but didn't turn it. He couldn't. Not since the funeral. It was as if keeping that door closed somehow kept Tyson alive in a bizarre way, preserved in amber, like a prehistoric insect. As if opening the door would finally admit he was gone forever. My dad is kinda like Superman. He can't be everywhere at once, but he's always doing something important. Warren closed his eyes tightly, but tears slipped out anyway. He slid down to sit on the floor in the hallway, back against the wall, facing the closed door. From his jacket's inner pocket, he pulled out Jenna's drawing. He unfolded it carefully, as though handling an ancient, fragile manuscript. The childlike outlines showed 3 people holding hands. Him, Tyson, and the little girl from the cemetery. Tyson's family, read the shaky lettering. How could a little girl who barely knew his son understand him so well? How could she grasp what Warren, with all his so-called intelligence and success, had never comprehended? Tyson had seen him as a hero, and he'd never known. Warren let his head fall back, gently hitting the wall. The sound echoed in the empty house. The same echo his life had become, an endless reverberation, amplified by emptiness. One day my dad will understand that he doesn't need to build the entire world, just the part where we can live together. He looked at Jenna's drawing again. The 3 figures seemed to gaze back at him as if asking, what now? What now indeed? Go back to work tomorrow as if nothing had happened. Keep designing skyscrapers and bridges while his inner life collapsed. Continue ignoring the locked bedroom, the pain, the absence. Warren got up with difficulty, legs numb from sitting so long on the cold floor. He walked down to his office, where he had spent so many nights working while Tyson slept upstairs. There he kept a bottle of whiskey. For a moment, he thought about pouring a glass, maybe 2 or 3, to drown the memories and silence the voices in his head. His hand was already on the bottle when his eyes caught something on the wall, a framed photo, almost forgotten among diplomas and awards. It showed him and Tyson in Central Park years ago. Tyson was about 4, riding on his father's shoulders, both smiling. One of the rare moments they'd shared together. There weren't many others after that. Tyson told me something on the last day we played at the park. He said, "One day my dad will understand that he doesn't need to build the entire world, just the part where we can live together." Warren put the bottle down without opening it and took the photo in his hands. He ran his fingers over the glass, as if he could somehow touch his son through time, as if he could go back and do it all differently. He returned to the living room and sat on the leather sofa he almost never used. The house was too quiet, too empty. Warren turned on the TV just for the noise, without really watching. He placed the photo and Jenna's drawing on the coffee table, alternating his gaze between the two. In the drawing, Jenna had given the figure representing Warren a smile he hadn't shown in a long time, a smile he feared he might never show again. But there was something in that drawing, beyond the simplicity of a child's pencil lines, something like hope. As if those 3 figures holding hands represented not just the past, but a possibility, a future that could never happen, yet still hovered in the air like an unanswered question. Warren leaned back against the sofa, exhausted. He closed his eyes, but Jenna's words still echoed in his mind, infinitely repeating. He said he loved you more than anything, that you were his superhero. Something strange and indescribable began to stir inside Warren. It wasn't peace, far from it, nor was it acceptance. It was more primitive, more basic. The realization that he couldn't go on like this, that he needed to do something, change something, become something different from what he'd always been. For the first time since Tyson's death, Warren didn't just want to survive the next day. He wanted... what? Even he didn't know. But he felt he needed to live up to that image his son had of him, an image he had never deserved. Warren looked again at Jenna's drawing of the three figures holding hands and felt something break inside him. Not like before, in the cemetery, when everything broke with pain and despair. This time, it was different. It was as if something old and rusted was cracking open to make room for something new. He still didn't know what to do or how to move forward, but for the first time in a year, he felt he needed to try. He owed that much to Tyson, and he owed it to himself. He fell asleep right there on the sofa, clutching the photo and the drawing to his chest. He dreamed of a red-haired little boy running ahead of him, calling for him to follow. 3 days passed since the encounter at the cemetery. 3 days during which Warren barely managed to focus at work. Jenna's words kept playing in his mind, even during important meetings. Sometimes he found himself looking at the drawing he'd stored in his desk drawer, as if that piece of paper held some kind of answer. On the morning of the 4th day, Warren made a decision. He had to find the little girl again. There were questions he hadn't asked, things about Tyson she might tell him, and in a way he couldn't explain, he felt he owed it to his son. But where to look? He didn't know where Jenna lived. He knew only her name, and that she'd played with Tyson at the park. The park. It was a start. Warren drove to the park near Tyson's old school. It was early afternoon, the sky overcast, the temperature dropping. Not many kids were around, a few mums with babies, an elderly couple feeding pigeons, 2 teenagers sharing headphones on a bench. He walked slowly along the paths, not sure exactly what he was looking for. There was a small playground with swings, slides, and a roundabout. A little farther on, a grove of old trees with wide trunks and low branches, perfect for climbing. That was where he saw her, a small figure sitting alone on a wooden bench under an old oak tree, legs swinging because they didn't reach the ground, turning a leaf around in her hand. Warren approached cautiously, unsure what to say. When he was just a few feet away, she looked up as though sensing his presence. Mr. Hale. Her eyes lit up in recognition. "Hi." "Hi, Jenna," Warren replied, stopping in front of her. "May I sit down?" She nodded, sliding over a bit, though there was plenty of space on the bench. "How did you find me?" she asked, curious. "You mentioned you played with Tyson in this park. I thought you might be here." Jenna smiled slightly, a small, reserved smile. "I come here almost every day. It's peaceful." Warren glanced around. The park was indeed quiet, the kind of silence you only get on weekdays when most kids are at school. "Don't you go to school?" he asked, then immediately regretted it. He sounded accusatory. "I mean, no, I don't," she answered simply, without offense. "Not since..." She left the sentence unfinished, going back to examining the leaf in her hand. It was a maple leaf, red and yellow at the edges, already starting to dry. "Not since," Warren gently prompted. Jenna shrugged, a gesture that seemed too mature for her age. "Not since my grandma died, a few months ago." Warren felt a tightening in his chest. "I'm sorry." "It's okay," she replied, still looking at the leaf. "I was already used to being alone. She worked a lot, you know. 2 jobs. Housekeeping at a hotel in the morning and a restaurant at night." Warren swallowed hard. A small child, already accustomed to solitude, like Tyson had been, he realized with a pang of guilt. "And your parents?" he asked, trying to be gentle. "Never met my dad," Jenna said with the brutal honesty of childhood. "My mom left when I was a baby. My grandma raised me. So who do you live with now?" Jenna finally looked at him with an expression that mingled defiance and vulnerability. "By myself, in my grandma's apartment." Warren blinked, stunned. "Alone?" "But..." How old are you? I'll be 10 in December, she answered, lifting her chin as if expecting him to argue. And there's nobody taking care of you. No social worker? Any relatives? No. A social worker came once after my grandma died, but the neighbor downstairs, Mrs. Peterson, told her I was her niece and that I'd be staying with her. She just said that so the social worker wouldn't take me. She checks on me sometimes and brings me food, but Jenna shrugged again. It's working out. I know how to take care of myself. I can make sandwiches and heat up soup. We've got hot water for baths. Sometimes the power gets shut off because I can't pay the bill, but... She paused. I manage. I always have. Warren's heart ached. The calm way she spoke about her situation was more disturbing than the words themselves, like it was normal, like she deserved nothing better. How do you afford food? How do you pay rent? My grandma left some money, and Mrs. Peterson helps with groceries. The landlord thinks I'm living with her. It's a tiny place. Doesn't cost much. Warren glanced around, as if expecting some responsible adult to appear from behind the trees, laughing and saying it was all a joke. But there was no one, just him and a 9-year-old who had been living alone for months. I probably shouldn't have told you this, Jenna said suddenly, her face growing serious. You're going to call someone, right? The police, social services. There was fear in her voice now, and Warren realized she must have kept this secret for months. Why tell him now? Maybe for the same reason he was seeking her out. There was some bond formed through Tyson that inspired a fragile trust. No, he said, though he wasn't entirely sure. I'm not calling anyone. Relief was visible in her expression. Promise. I promise, but Jenna, you can't keep living like this. It's dangerous. No child should be on her own. What other choice do I have? She asked, with a wisdom born of necessity. If they find me, they'll send me to a shelter or foster care. I've heard stories. I don't want that. Warren felt something shift inside him, like long rusted gears turning again. What if, he started, surprising even himself. What if you came to live with me? The words came out before he could think them through. They were impulsive, illogical, maybe even irresponsible. Yet strangely, they felt right. Jenna eyed him warily. Why? You hardly know me. You knew my son, Warren replied, realizing that was reason enough. Tyson liked you. That means you're special. Jenna kept looking at him, evaluating. Her eyes, too old for her childish face, seemed to see beyond words. Do you have a big house? She finally asked. Yes. With food in the fridge and electricity that doesn't get shut off. Warren felt a pang in his chest. Yes, Jenna, there's food and electricity and hot water. And a bedroom just for you. She considered this for a moment, swinging her feet. You're not doing this just because you feel sorry for me, right? Because I don't need pity. I can take care of myself. The dignity in those words, coming from someone so small, hit Warren like a punch. No, it wasn't pity. What he felt was something deeper, more primal. Perhaps it was his chance to finally do something right after so many mistakes, to become the kind of person his son believed him to be. It's not pity, he answered truthfully. It's because no one should be alone. Not you, not me. That answer seemed to satisfy her. Jenna slid off the bench to stand. I should get my stuff then. Warren blinked, surprised by how quickly she decided. You want to come? I guess so, she shrugged. I don't have much to lose, right? If it doesn't work out, I can always come back. The simplicity of how she viewed such a significant decision astonished him. Maybe it was because, for a child who'd already lost so much, moving in with a stranger didn't seem as frightening as it would to an adult. Okay, Warren replied, rising to his feet. Let's go get your things then. The house was exactly as she had imagined. Big, beautiful, with furniture that looked expensive and huge windows. But it also felt cold, as if no one really lived there. There were no photos on the walls, no personal items scattered about. It looked like a magazine spread, not a home. Warren led her to a guest room on the second floor. It was a spacious room with a single bed, a desk, and a dresser. The walls were painted in a very light blue, almost white. So you can stay here, he said, suddenly unsure. If you want to change anything, the wall color, the furniture—" "It's perfect," Jenna replied, setting her small suitcase on the bed. Her entire life fit in there. A few clothes, a handful of toys, a photo album of her grandmother, and a shoebox with her drawings. "Want to see the rest of the house?" Jenna nodded and followed him along the hallway. Warren showed her his bedroom, his office, and the bathroom she'd use. Another door in the corridor was closed, which he didn't mention. He didn't have to. Jenna already knew it was Tyson's room. "The kitchen's downstairs," Warren continued as they went down. "You can help yourself to whatever you want, whenever you want. There's cereal, milk, fruit." He was talking quickly, as though nervous, uncertain of what he was doing. Probably because he truly didn't know, Jenna thought. Nor did she. The kitchen was large and modern, with appliances that looked hardly used. Warren opened the fridge, showing its sparse contents. "We'll need to buy more groceries," he said, sounding embarrassed. "It's okay," Jenna replied, still taking in the house. It was so different from the small apartment where she'd lived with her grandma. There, space was tight, but it was alive. Here, space was abundant, but something was missing. "You must be hungry," Warren said, checking the time. It was almost dinner time. "A little. I can order pizza. Do you like pizza?" Jenna nodded. Warren grabbed his phone and placed the order without asking her which toppings she preferred. He seemed to realize his mistake once he hung up. "Sorry, I should have asked what you like. I ordered half cheese, half pepperoni. Is that okay?" "That's great," Jenna replied. Though she actually preferred chicken, she didn't want to start off by causing problems. While they waited for the pizza, an awkward silence settled between them. Warren seemed unsure what to say, and Jenna was used to being quiet. After all, she'd spent months alone, speaking only when necessary. "Do you want to watch TV?" Warren finally asked. "Sure." They went to the living room, where an enormous TV dominated one wall. Warren turned it to a cartoon channel and handed Jenna the remote. She sat on the sofa, looking tiny against the black leather. "I'll set the table," he said, leaving the room. Jenna watched the screen but wasn't really paying attention. Her thoughts wandered, trying to understand how her life had changed so drastically in just a few hours. That morning, she'd been alone in her small apartment, trying to make the leftover soup stretch another day. Now she was in a mansion with a man she hardly knew, waiting for a pizza to arrive. Would this be permanent? Probably not. Grown-ups changed their minds. They made promises and then forgot them. She'd learned that early on. Still, it would be nice to have a comfortable bed and regular meals for however long it lasted. The doorbell rang, announcing the pizza delivery. Warren answered and returned with a large box, the aroma of melted cheese filling the room. "Let's eat in the kitchen," he said. The table was set with plates, napkins, and cups. Warren served them both and sat across from Jenna. "So," he began, clearly uncomfortable, "do you like school? I mean, before?" "It was okay," Jenna replied, shrugging. "I liked math and art." "Math?" Warren seemed genuinely surprised. Tyson hated math. "I know. Sometimes I tried to help him with his homework." Another silence fell between them. Warren chewed slowly, as though every bite required all his concentration. "Tomorrow we can buy some things for you," he said at last. "Clothes, school supplies." "School supplies?" Jenna frowned. "I'm going back to school." "Well, yes. Kids should be in school." Jenna nodded slowly. It made sense. If she was going to live here, she'd have to return to a normal routine. School, homework, schedules. Part of her felt relieved, another part anxious. "How long will I stay here?" she suddenly asked. Warren paused mid-bite, caught off guard. "I don't know exactly." "How long do you want to stay?" Jenna shrugged again, a gesture that was becoming her trademark. "Just wondering so I can prepare myself." Warren put the pizza slice down, looking uneasy. "Jenna, I'm not planning to send you away, but I don't know exactly how this will work. I've never done this before." "Taken care of a child?" "Yes. Even with Tyson, He stopped, swallowing hard. "I wasn't very good at it. Tyson didn't think so." Her words seemed to hit Warren deeply. He lowered his gaze to his plate, unable to reply. The rest of dinner passed in silence. When they finished, Warren showed Jenna how to store the leftovers and how to run the dishwasher. Then, looking emotionally spent, he said, "I guess it's getting late. You must be tired. If you want to go to bed." "Okay," Jenna replied, even though she wasn't really tired. "Good night, Mr. Hale." "You can call me Warren," he said, offering a small smile. "Good night, Warren." "Good night, Jenna." She climbed the stairs to her new room, feeling his gaze follow her. When she closed the door, she sat on the soft bed, looking around. The room was pretty and clean. The bed was comfortable, no leaking ceiling, no roaches crawling on the walls. But it still wasn't hers, like nothing in her life ever really had been. Jenna pulled her pajamas from her suitcase and got changed. She brushed her teeth in the fancy bathroom, impressed by how many towels there were. Then she returned to her room and got under the covers, pulling the blanket up to her chin. The silence here was different from what she was used to. Not the silence of abandonment, but the silence of two people who didn't know how to coexist. Two lonely souls under the same roof, still distant, still lost. In the hallway, Warren stopped in front of Tyson's door. As usual, he rested his hand on the knob but didn't turn it. He still wasn't ready. Instead, he walked quietly to the guest room door, now Jenna's, and listened. Not a sound. She was probably asleep by now, worn out from the sudden upheaval in her life. Warren returned to his own bedroom, wondering if he was doing the right thing. Could he take care of a child when he'd so miserably failed his own? Was this a chance for redemption or just another chance to disappoint someone who needed him? The silence of the house, once suffocating, now felt less oppressive. There was another breath here, another life. He didn't know it yet. But something was starting to change. 2 weeks had gone by since Jenna moved into Warren's home. 2 weeks, and everything felt like it was circling back to where it started. As if that moment of connection at the park had been just a distant dream, an illusion of change that was now dissolving in the haze of routine. In the beginning, there had been an effort. Warren took Jenna shopping for clothes, school supplies, and even some toys. He enrolled her in the same school Tyson had attended. He stocked the fridge with enough food to fill every shelf. He did all the practical things, all the outward gestures necessary, but his heart remained closed, locked away like Tyson's bedroom door at the end of the hallway. By the third morning, Warren was back at the office. "I've got important meetings," he explained, tightening his tie in front of the mirror. "I'll try to come home early." He did not that day or the next. The promise of getting home early became as empty as the house itself during the day. Now, on this rainy Thursday, Jenna sat alone at the kitchen table, drawing. She'd just come back from school, drenched from the downpour because no one had picked her up. Mrs. Reynolds, the neighbor Warren had hired to keep an eye on her, couldn't make it due to a doctor's appointment. Jenna was used to walking alone, but the rain made the journey harder and sadder. In her sketchbook lay a page where 3 figures stood under an umbrella: a tall man, a small girl, and a red-headed boy. Above them, a rainbow stretched across the sky. It wasn't real, of course. None of it was real. Not the boy who no longer existed, nor the man who, though physically present, felt absent as a ghost. The wall clock read 6:47 p.m. Warren had called about an hour ago to say he'd be late. "There's food in the fridge," he had said quickly before hanging up. The same phrase every time, as though eating was the only thing a child needed. Jenna closed her notebook and went to the fridge. Indeed, there was food: yogurt, fruit, leftover lasagna from 2 days ago. Everything her body needed, but nothing that filled the emptiness inside. She took the lasagna, heated a portion in the microwave as Warren had shown her, then sat back down at the table, eating silently while watching the rain fall outside the kitchen window. The house was far too big, too nice, with its expensive furniture and decorative pieces that seemed untouched. On the walls, abstract art that told no story. On the shelves, books no one read. It was a house without memories, as cold as polished marble. Jenna finished her meal, washed the plate and put it away. She'd learned to be tidy since she was small, helping her grandmother who worked so hard. She walked upstairs to her bedroom, the guest room she now occupied but didn't really feel was hers. On the way, she stopped in front of Tyson's closed door. She always felt the urge to open it, to see where her friend had lived, what toys he had, what color he'd painted his walls. But she never had the courage. It was a sacred space, a temple Warren kept sealed. In her own room, Jenna turned on the small TV Warren had installed. Another object, another material thing that didn't replace a human presence. But at least it was noise, something to break the stifling silence of the house. She lay on the bed and watched cartoons without really seeing them. Her mind wandered back to the small apartment she'd shared with her grandma, cramped, simple, with leaking pipes and a noisy fridge. Yet it had one thing this mansion didn't: genuine warmth. Even after working 2 shifts, her grandma always found the energy to ask about her day, brush her hair, or tell her a bedtime story. Here, Jenna had everything money could buy, but none of what really mattered. A tear slipped from the corner of her eye, wetting the pillow. It wasn't the first time she cried silently, and it wouldn't be the last. She was reliving the same sense of abandonment, just in a different, more luxurious setting. The sound of the front door opening drifted up. Warren had arrived. Jenna quickly wiped her tears but remained still, listening to his footsteps downstairs, the fridge door opening and closing, the clink of ice in a glass, footsteps climbing the stairs. For a moment she imagined he might knock on her door, ask how her day was, if she needed anything, if the lasagna tasted okay. Maybe he'd come in and sit on the edge of the bed, like her grandma used to, and talk a bit before wishing her good night. But his steps went right past her door. There was a pause, that familiar pause in front of Tyson's bedroom, and then the sound of Warren's own bedroom door closing. That was how it went every night, a silent ritual neither had agreed on but both observed. Jenna turned her attention back to the TV, though the colorful cartoon only highlighted the drabness of her real life, like a rainbow painted on a gray wall. She wondered how long this would last. How long before Warren realized bringing her here wouldn't fill the void Tyson had left. How long before he gave up on her completely, the way he seemed to be doing, bit by bit. In the beginning, she had hoped it might be different, that maybe she'd find a new home here. That Warren, having known loss just like she had, would understand what it felt like to be alone. But now she saw that grief, rather than bringing them together, had pushed them apart. He, in his pain, couldn't see hers. The story kept repeating, like a sad song stuck on loop. Adults leave even when physically present. Promises dissolve like sugar in water. Hopes wilt before they can bloom. Jenna turned off the TV and pulled the blanket up to her chin. She clutched the worn-out teddy bear she had brought from her old apartment, the only toy that truly mattered, a gift from her grandma on her 6th birthday. "Good night, Grandma," she whispered to the dark ceiling. "Good night, Tyson." In the loneliness of her room, surrounded by material comfort but starving for affection, Jenna fell asleep, thinking that maybe it was time to leave. Time to return to the little apartment where, if she was alone, at least she wouldn't feel the weight of rejection, where she wouldn't have to see, day after day, the living reminder that she wasn't enough, that she'd never be the son Warren lost. Tomorrow, she decided before drifting off. Tomorrow, she would write a note and leave. Warren woke up later than usual that Friday. The clock on his bedside table read 8:37, and his heart pounded as he leaped out of bed. He was late for a meeting with Japanese investors, a meeting that would determine the future of his biggest project to date. He took the quickest shower of his life, put on the suit he'd laid out the night before, and went downstairs, adjusting his tie. There was no time for coffee, barely time for anything. He walked right through the kitchen toward the door leading to the garage. It was only when he grabbed his car keys that a thought crossed his mind. Jenna. She should be getting ready for school. Had she eaten breakfast yet? Did she need lunch money? Warren hesitated, hand on the doorknob. He looked at his watch, 8:46. The meeting was at 9:30 downtown, at least a 25-minute drive without traffic. "Jenna," he called, stepping back toward the stairs. No answer. Maybe she'd already left. School started at 8:30 if he remembered correctly. Maybe Mrs. Reynolds had taken her, or perhaps Jenna had gone alone, as she often did. Reassured by that thought, Warren got in his car and drove away, mentally rehearsing his presentation for the meeting in less than an hour. The day passed in a blur of commitments. The meeting with the Japanese investors lasted the whole morning, followed by a business lunch that ran until 3 Tao. Then a visit to the construction site with the civil engineer, discussing foundations and structural changes. When Warren finally checked the time again, it was past 7 in the evening. Driving home through the chaotic Friday traffic, his thoughts drifted to Jenna. They hadn't really talked in days. In fact, they barely saw each other. She was asleep when he got home, and he was asleep when she left. A flash of guilt washed over him. He was repeating the same pattern he'd had with Tyson, present in theory, absent in practice, providing material things, failing in emotional presence. Maybe he could make it up to her this weekend. They could do something together on Saturday, a walk in the park, maybe a movie. What kind of film would a child her age like? Warren really had no clue. With these vague plans forming, he finally arrived home a little after 8. The lights were off, which was unusual. Jenna normally left at least the entry light on. Warren opened the door, calling out as he entered, "Jenna, I'm home." Silence. Absolute, oppressive silence. He turned on the lights, glancing around. The living room was empty. The kitchen, too. No TV sounds, no sign of another human presence beyond his own. "Jenna?" he tried again, heading upstairs. Her bedroom door was open. The room was dark, untouched. Warren flicked on the light and felt a chill run down his spine. Her school books, usually piled on the desk, were gone. The worn-out teddy bear she kept on her bed was missing. The hairbrush, colored hair ties, and the few personal items Jenna owned, none of them were there. Warren stepped inside, heart pounding. He opened the closet to find empty hangers. The dresser drawers were empty too. It was as though Jenna had never lived there. That was when he spotted the folded paper on the pillow. With trembling fingers, Warren picked it up and unfolded it. One single sentence, written in that familiar childlike handwriting. "Now I understand why Tyson missed you so much." Warren sank onto the bed, the note still in his hands. 7 simple words carrying the weight of a much larger accusation. She was gone, just walked out as if she'd never been there. And worst of all, he hadn't even noticed her absence until now. How many hours had it been? Had she left in the morning for school and decided not to come back? Or had she left before dawn? He didn't know. He had no way of knowing. He'd spent the entire day not really thinking about her, except for that brief moment before leaving the house. Warren stood, left the room. The note crumpled in his fist. The sense of déjà vu was suffocating. The silence, the painful absence, the gnawing guilt. He'd known it all too well. He reached for his phone. He had to call someone. The police? The school? Was this a police matter, or should he call a social worker? He didn't know where Jenna had gone, but he had a strong guess. She'd probably gone back to that old apartment, that run-down place she'd lived in alone. He pulled his phone out of his pocket, but paused before dialing any number. What would he say? That a child under his care had run away because he was incapable of being present. That he, a wealthy adult with every resource available, had failed to give attention to a little girl who'd already lost everything. The phone slipped from his fingers and landed on the carpet with a dull thud. Warren pressed his hands to his face, feeling the exhaustion of years weighing him down. Without thinking, his feet carried him to the closed door at the end of the hallway, the door he never opened, the untouched sanctuary that held Tyson's memory. Warren stopped in front of it, like he did every night. His hand reached the knob as usual, but this time, something was different. This time there was not just pain, but realization. For the first time, he saw the pattern. Losing Tyson wasn't just a tragedy, but a lesson he'd refused to learn. His absence from his son's life hadn't been limited to the final days. It had been a pattern for years. And now, he was repeating the same mistake with Jenna. Warren felt his legs weaken. He slid down with his back against Tyson's door. For a long moment, he just sat there, breathing heavily, weighed down by the truth he could finally face. "Forgive me, son," he whispered to the closed door, voice trembling. "I'm doing the same thing to your friend. I'm repeating it all. I have to change before it's too late again." Speaking the words out loud made them echo in the empty hallway. It was the first time Warren admitted aloud what his heart already knew. Lack of time wasn't what kept him from Tyson, or now from Jenna. It was fear. Fear of getting close, of caring too much, of loving and losing again. He'd lost Tyson by never truly being there, and now he risked losing Jenna for the same reason. The difference was that Tyson was gone forever. But Jenna was still out there somewhere. There was still time to fix this if he had the courage. Warren stood up, determination replacing despair. He had to find Jenna. He had to bring her back. More than that, he had to change. Not just say he would change, not just want to change. He had to choose to truly become different. He picked up the phone from the floor and dialed Mrs. Reynolds' number. Perhaps she had noticed something earlier in the day. "Hello?" The older woman's voice came after 3 rings. "Mrs. Reynolds, it's Warren Hale. Sorry to call so late." "Mr. Hale, I was just about to call you. I'm worried about little Jenna. She didn't show up at school today. The principal called me to ask where she was." Warren felt his heart clench. So Jenna had left before daybreak. "She's not here," he replied heavily. "She left a note. She's gone." "Oh my goodness," Mrs. Reynolds exclaimed. "Have you called the police?" "Not yet, but I think I know where she might be," Warren said, drawing a deep breath. "I'm going to find her now. Would you like me to come with you?" "No, thank you. This is something I need to do alone." Warren hung up and, without wasting another second, grabbed his keys again. He headed downstairs, Jenna's note still crumpled in his pocket. He paused only to pick up the spare key to the girl's apartment, one he'd kept after moving her belongings. He stepped into the cold night, his determination growing with every step. He would find Jenna. He would bring her home. And this time, he would truly be there for her, not just physically, but wholly. It was a promise he made not just to her or to Tyson, but most of all to himself. As he drove through the dark streets, Warren wondered what he would say to her. How would he explain that he finally understood? How would he convince a child who had been abandoned so many times to trust him again? He didn't know. But for the first time in a long time, he was willing to genuinely try. The car sped along the main avenue, taking him toward the older, simpler neighborhoods. Toward the small, run-down apartment where Jenna had lived alone after her grandmother's death. Toward a chance to right his wrongs before it was too late, before history could repeat itself entirely. Warren glanced at the night sky through the windshield. The stars gleamed, distant and indifferent to human tragedies. Yet somehow, in that vastness, he almost felt Tyson watching, hoping his father would finally learn the lesson he'd tried to teach in life, that he didn't need to build the entire world, just the part where they could live together. Night deepened as Warren drove through the city streets. First, he checked Jenna's old apartment, but the place was dark and empty. He knocked on her neighbor, Mrs. Peterson's door. She said she hadn't seen the girl. He checked the lobby, the nearby playground, the corner store where Jenna sometimes bought bread. No luck. With every fruitless stop, his desperation grew. Warren drove aimlessly, slowing whenever he saw a child, studying each face under the yellow glow of street lamps. The dashboard clock read 11:18 p.m. when he stopped at a red light, feeling utterly drained and out of ideas. Where would a child go on a cold night like this? Where would she feel safe? Then he remembered. Jenna's words echoed in his memory. "We used to play in the park near his house. We'd make up stories, climb the trees." The park, where Jenna and Tyson had built their friendship, where she might feel closest to the friend she'd lost. Warren made a sharp turn, ignoring the angry honk of another driver. He sped along familiar roads until he reached the municipal park, just a few blocks from his home. At this hour, it should have been closed, but the old rusty lock on the gate could be easily pried open by any resourceful child. He parked haphazardly and rushed to the gate. As expected, it was slightly ajar. Warren slipped inside, his footsteps echoing in the nighttime stillness. The park looked like a different world now. Shadows of trees stretching across the ground like ghostly figures. Empty swings swaying in the breeze with the occasional creak. "Jenna," he called, his voice unnaturally loud in the silence. "Jenna, are you here?" No answer. Warren headed toward the playground. In the dim light from distant street lamps, he made out the shapes of the slide, the roundabout, the swings, all empty. He was about to give up when he noticed a slight movement at the top of the slide, a small silhouette huddled in the darkness. "Jenna," he called again, approaching slowly so as not to scare her. The figure moved but remained still. Warren climbed the slide ladder carefully, feeling the cold metal under his palms. At the top, he saw her. Jenna was curled up in the small space, hugging her knees to her chest. She wore the same faded blue coat she'd had at the cemetery. Her little backpack sat beside her, probably containing everything she owned in the world. "Hi," Warren said softly, almost in a whisper. Jenna lifted her gaze. Her eyes were red and swollen, but dry, like she'd run out of tears and now only resignation remained. "How did you find me?" she asked, her voice rough. "I remembered what you said about playing here with Tyson." Warren sat beside her, leaving a small space. "I tried to think where I would go if I were you." Jenna nodded slightly, returning her gaze to the empty park. "I came to get you," Warren continued. "Why?" The question was simple and direct, without blame, but charged with genuine curiosity. Warren drew a deep breath. He hadn't rehearsed any speeches. All the well-formed sentences, the logical arguments he'd planned while searching, seemed useless now. "I'm not here to make promises," he finally said, staring at his own hands. "I'm not saying everything will magically change overnight. I just came to ask for another chance." Jenna stayed silent, still hugging her knees. "Your note," Warren went on, voice trembling. "What you wrote made me realize something I should have understood a long time ago." She finally looked at him. "What?" "That I'm treating you exactly like I treated Tyson. I'm physically there, but I'm not really there. I'm in the same house but miles away." Warren swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "And the worst part is, I know how much it hurts. I saw it in his eyes, and now I see it in yours." Jenna studied Warren intently. There was something different in his eyes that night, something she hadn't seen before. An unguarded vulnerability, a raw honesty that had been buried beneath layers of pain and distance. "I don't know if I can change completely," he admitted. "I don't know if I can promise to never work late again or be the best caretaker you deserve, but I can promise I'll try. Really try this time." Warren held out his hand, not to pull her, but as an invitation. "Will you come home with me? Please?" Jenna stared at the outstretched hand, then at Warren's eyes. For a long moment, she just looked at him, as if searching his face, his expression. Then, slowly, she unfolded from her curled position and, instead of taking his hand, threw herself against Warren's chest in a sudden, desperate hug. Warren froze for a second, startled by the unexpected gesture. Then his arms wrapped around her, holding her as though he feared she might vanish. Something broke inside him again. That dam, already cracked, finally collapsed completely. Tears came, hot and uncontrollable, rolling down his face as silent sobs shook his body. He cried for Tyson, for Jenna, for himself, for all the lost time and all the unspoken words. "I'm sorry," he whispered through his sobs, voice muffled against her hair. "I'm so sorry, Jenna." He felt her small arms tighten around his neck, her face buried against his shoulder. He couldn't tell if she was crying, too. He just knew that. In that moment, something was changing between them. Some invisible barrier dissolved in the cold night air. They stayed like that for a long time, huddled at the top of the slide. A grown man and a little girl, two lonely souls who'd found each other through shared grief. When they finally pulled apart, Warren saw a subtle difference in Jenna's eyes. There was an understanding there beyond her years, a near-adult comprehension, as if she'd somehow grown through these last few days apart. "Shall we go home?" he asked, wiping his tears with his coat sleeve. Jenna nodded, picking up her backpack. "Let's..." They climbed down the slide together, Warren going first and extending a hand to help her with the last steps. She accepted his help, but he noticed a new strength in her grip, a steadiness that hadn't been there before. They walked side by side toward the car, the space between them smaller now, but still present. Some things wouldn't change overnight. Trust would have to be rebuilt slowly, day by day. But for the first time since Tyson's death, Warren felt there was a real chance for a new start, a chance to do things differently, to be different. As he drove back home, Jenna silent in the passenger seat, he made a silent promise to Tyson, to Jenna and to himself. This time he would be present, truly present. And maybe, just maybe, they could build something resembling a home. The first days after Jenna's return were strange, marked by a silence different from before. Not the silence of distance, but of anticipation, like they were both holding their breath, waiting to see if things would really be different now. On Monday morning, Warren did something he had never done before. He called the office and announced he would be working from home for the rest of the week. Family matters, he explained to his partner, Robert Shee, who was surprised. In 15 years of partnership, Warren had never taken time off for family matters. When Jenna came downstairs for breakfast, already dressed for school, she found Warren in the kitchen attempting, unsuccessfully, to make pancakes. "Good morning," he said, turning around with the pan in hand and an embarrassed look. "I think these didn't turn out so great." Jenna eyed the misshapen, slightly burnt pancakes. A shy smile appeared on her face. "Can I try?" she offered. Warren handed her the pan, relieved. "Please." Side by side, they prepared breakfast. Jenna taught Warren how to flip pancakes at just the right moment, while Warren told her how his own father had been hopeless in the kitchen. "My mom never let him do more than boil water for coffee," he recalled with a smile. "Is your mom still alive?" Jenna asked, pouring more batter into the pan. "No. She and my dad passed away in a car accident years ago." Jenna nodded sympathetically. "Like my grandma?" "Yes, like your grandma." When they finished eating, Warren grabbed his car keys. "I'll drive you to school today, and I'll pick you up afterwards too." Jenna looked at him, surprised. "But what about your job?" "I can work from home this week. I have some projects to review, nothing that requires me to be at the office." On the drive to school, they talked about small things, the weather, the subjects Jenna would study that day, the book she was reading for English class. In front of the school, Warren hesitated before letting her go. "I'll pick you up at 3, okay?" Jenna nodded as she got out of the car. Then, before shutting the door, she turned back to him. "You really will come, right?" The question held no reproach, only genuine uncertainty, like she'd been let down too many times to fully believe. "I will," Warren promised, meeting her gaze. 3 on the dot. "I'll be right here." And he was. At 2:55, he was already parked outside, 5 minutes early, scanning the gates anxiously. The relief he felt upon seeing Jenna was strange, as though part of him had feared she might disappear again. He waved, and her small smile when she spotted him was worth more than any multi-million-dollar contract he'd ever signed. The next day, the routine repeated, and the next, breakfast together, talk during the drive to school, Warren working at home, picking her up promptly at dismissal. In the evenings, changes were even more noticeable. Instead of locking himself away in his office, Warren started making dinner with Jenna. He didn't know much beyond the basics, but he was learning. Together they made pasta, attempted to roast chicken which turned out slightly undercooked, and even tried a lasagna that, surprisingly, was good. During dinner, Warren asked questions, not the perfunctory, "How was your day?" but more specific ones that showed he was truly paying attention. "How did your science project presentation go?" "Did the teacher like your idea about soil erosion?" Jenna, shy at first with so much attention, gradually opened up. She talked about school, classmates, and the books she enjoyed. Sometimes she mentioned Tyson, recalling moments they had shared at the park. Rather than changing the subject as he once would have, Warren listened, smiling at the funny stories, asking questions about their adventures. It was painful, but in a different way. Pain mixed with gratitude that he could learn parts of Tyson's life he'd never known. One Wednesday after dinner, Warren suggested they watch a movie together. They picked an animated film about a lonely robot who finds love and purpose caring for a tiny plant. Jenna loved it. Warren found himself more moved than he cared to admit, especially in the scenes where the robot protected the plant against all odds. Over the weekend, they went to a toy store. Warren said Jenna could choose anything she wanted. She walked among the shelves, looking at everything with interest but showing no real desire, until they reached the doll aisle. Her eyes lit up when she spotted a simple rag doll with brown yarn hair and a blue dress. It was nothing compared to the more elaborate electronic dolls, but somehow it called to her. "That one?" Warren asked, surprised by her modest choice. Jenna nodded. "She looks like me." Warren glanced from the doll to Jenna and smiled. There really was a resemblance in the hair color and gentle expression. "Then let's take her home." That evening, after dinner, they sat on the sofa to watch another movie. Jenna held her new doll in her arms, occasionally adjusting its blue dress or smoothing out its yarn hair. Halfway through, Warren noticed Jenna had fallen asleep. Her head rested on a cushion, the doll clutched tightly, her face peaceful in a way he had rarely seen since they met. Warren turned off the TV and watched her for a long moment. Something about that scene deeply touched him. A small child who finally felt safe enough to doze off, no longer bracing herself for more loss. Gently, so as not to wake her, Warren lifted Jenna in his arms and carried her upstairs. She barely stirred, instinctively nestling against his chest, still holding the doll firmly. As he tucked her into bed and pulled the covers over her, Warren felt something shift within him. A certainty that had been growing these past days solidified in his mind. The next morning at breakfast, Warren set his mug on the table and looked directly at Jenna. "I have something important to tell you." Jenna looked up from her cereal, alert. "These last days, since you came back, they've been different for me." "Good. Better than anything I've felt in the past year." Warren paused, choosing his words. "And it made me realize something about you, about me, about us." Jenna waited, her eyes focused on him. "I want you to be my daughter. I want to adopt you, officially." Jenna's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. Her eyes went wide, full of surprise, confusion, and hope. You're sure?" she asked, her voice small. "Absolutely," Warren replied. "I talked to a lawyer yesterday. He said it might be complicated since you're not officially in the foster system, but it's doable. And I want to try, if you want it too." Jenna slowly lowered the spoon into the bowl, her face a swirl of emotions Warren couldn't fully decipher. For a moment, she did nothing but look at him, as though testing the sincerity of his words, the firmness of his decision. Then, without a word, she stood, walked over to him, and stopped in front of his chair. She still said nothing. Suddenly, she wrapped her arms around his neck. This wasn't a desperate hug, like the one in the park. It was steady, determined, almost grown up in its purpose. It was the hug of someone making a conscious choice, not someone clinging to a lifeline. Warren hugged her back, feeling her small body tremble slightly against his. "Is that a yes?" he asked quietly. Jenna just nodded against his shoulder, unable to speak. She didn't need to. The hug said everything. The decision was made, by both of them. The adoption process started faster than Warren expected. His lawyer, impressed by his determination, expedited the initial paperwork, and their first meetings with a social worker were scheduled for the following week. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon. Warren was in the living room, working on his laptop to organize the documents needed for the process, while Jenna was sprawled on the carpet, drawing. She had colored pencils scattered all around, and that new rag doll, whom she had named Lucy, rested nearby as though supervising the art. The doorbell rang, surprising them both. They weren't expecting visitors. "I'll get it," Warren said, standing up. He opened the door to find Robert Sullivan, his business partner of 15 years. Tall, impeccably dressed even on a Saturday, carrying a leather briefcase under his arm, wearing that trademark grin Warren knew so well, the grin of big deals. "Warren, sorry to drop in without warning, but this couldn't wait until Monday," Robert said, walking in without waiting for an invitation. "I tried calling, but you didn't answer." Warren shut the door, trying to hide his annoyance at the unannounced visit. He had purposely turned his phone off to spend time with Jenna uninterrupted. "Robert, what's so urgent?" Robert halted upon seeing Jenna on the living room floor. She looked up from her drawing, curious about the stranger. "Oh, you have company," Robert remarked, clearly surprised to see a child in Warren's house. "This is Jenna," Warren introduced, Jenna, this is Robert, my partner at work. Hi, said Jenna quietly, returning to her drawing. Robert gave Warren a questioning look, but Warren simply said, "Let's go to my office." Once in the office, Robert wasted no time. He opened the briefcase and spread out plans, graphs, and projections on the desk. Tokyo, Warren. We finally got Tokyo. Warren stared at the materials, instantly recognizing the project, the Asahi Tower, a mixed-use skyscraper in the heart of Tokyo's financial district. They had bid on it 3 years ago, but lost to a Japanese firm. "Nagata called yesterday," Robert said excitedly. "The other firm got disqualified. Issues with the foundation. They want us." "Specifically, they want you." Warren looked at the plans, feeling the familiar surge of excitement that always accompanied major projects. The Asahi Tower would be a career-defining job, the kind of building that would cement his legacy as an architect. "It's a 3-year contract," Robert explained, showing him the financial projections. "The numbers are, well, see for yourself." Warren whistled softly at the amount. It was a fortune, enough to secure the firm's future for at least 5 years. "The only catch," Robert went on, "is that they want you on site, in Tokyo, for at least the first year. Weekly meetings with investors, direct supervision until the foundation work is done." Warren felt a chill spread through him. "A year? In Tokyo?" "I know it's a long time," Robert said quickly, "but think about what it means for the company, for your career. This is the kind of project we've worked our entire lives for." Warren stayed silent, studying the impressive numbers. Only a few weeks ago, he wouldn't have hesitated. He would have packed his bags that very night and flown across the world to chase professional glory. "We have to give them an answer by Monday," Robert pressed. "They have other firms on standby. That's why I came in person. I knew you'd want to see these numbers before deciding." Warren nodded absently, his mind racing. A year in Tokyo, far from home, far from Jenna. "So what do you think?" Robert asked eagerly. "Should I call Nagata today and confirm?" Warren didn't respond. Instead, he stood and walked to the office door, opening it slightly. From this angle, he could see Jenna still lying on the living room rug, busy with her drawing, her tongue sticking out in concentration, just like Tyson used to do when he drew. "Warren," Robert said, confused. "Give me a minute," Warren replied, stepping out of the office. He approached Jenna quietly, watching from above. She was drawing a house. Notice it was clearly their house. 2 figures held hands in front of the building, a tall man and a small girl. Next to them, a transparent figure, almost like a smiling ghost, a red-headed boy. "It's our family," Jenna explained, sensing him there. "Hayosike, me and Tyson watching over us." Warren felt a rush of warmth in his chest, so intense it almost hurt, an ache that was somehow good. The ache of a heart that had begun to feel again after a long slumber. He returned to the office, where Robert waited impatiently, fiddling with the documents. "Well?" Robert asked. "This is the opportunity we've been waiting for." Warren looked again at the drawings and the staggering figures, everything this project represented for his career. Then he looked through the slightly open door at Jenna in the living room. For the first time in many years, the choice was easy, obvious, undeniable. "No," he said, surprising even himself with the firmness in his voice. "No," Robert repeated, stunned. "What do you mean, no?" "Warren, did you see these numbers?" "I did," Warren said calmly. "And I'm saying no. I can't go to Tokyo. I can't be gone for a year. But this is the Asahi Tower. It's the project you've always wanted." Warren smiled. Not the tense and professional smile he wore in meetings, but a real, peaceful one. "I already have what I need, Robert. Now she needs me." Robert followed Warren's gaze toward the living room, where Jenna continued drawing, oblivious to the conversation that would decide her future. "The girl?" Robert asked, astonished. "Is she some relative's daughter?" "No," Warren replied. "She's my daughter, or she will be, once the adoption is final." "Adoption?" Robert slumped into a chair, utterly taken aback. "Warren, are you sure? That's a huge decision." The most important I've ever made. Robert studied his friend and partner's face. He had known Warren for nearly 2 decades, had seen him lose his wife, bury himself in work, grow distant from Tyson, then spiral into guilt and grief after Tyson's death. The man before him now seemed different. There was a peace in his eyes that Robert hadn't seen in years. "You've changed," Robert observed, not as a criticism but as a simple fact. "Yes," Warren agreed, not offering further explanation. He didn't need to. Robert knew the story, how Warren had always prioritized work over everything else, how he was consumed by regret and mourning. Now, seeing the resolve in his gaze, Robert realized he was witnessing not just a declined project, but a profound life change. "I could suggest a remote arrangement," Robert offered after a moment's thought. "You could guide the team from here, do weekly video calls, short trips only when absolutely necessary. Would that work?" Warren considered. "Maybe, but on one condition. No long trips. Nothing that keeps me away more than a few days. And no more night or weekend meetings. My time with Jenna is sacred now." Robert smiled, a genuine smile this time. "I'll talk to Nagata. I'm sure we can work something out." He began gathering the documents, but paused to see Warren still staring into the living room. "So you know," Robert said, "I never thought I'd see the day Warren Hale would turn down the project of a lifetime for the sake of a child." Warren grinned, not taking his eyes off Jenna. "Neither did I. But here we are." Robert clapped him on the shoulder. "I'm happy for you, Warren." "Really?" After Robert left, Warren returned to the living room and sat on the floor beside Jenna. "Who was that?" she asked, pointing to Robert as he got into his car outside. "A friend," Warren replied. "He came to offer me a very important job." "Are you going?" Jenna's voice held a note of anxiety. Warren smiled, gently brushing back her hair. "No, I'm not going anywhere. I'm exactly where I need to be." Jenna's eyes shone with understanding beyond her years. She went back to her drawing, adding more details to the house, the figures, and the little garden taking shape on the paper. Warren watched her small, skillful hands move the pencil, creating a colorful world where 3 people, a family, lived together, happily. For the first time since Tyson's death, he felt life could be good again, not perfect, it would never be perfect, but good, authentic, real, and that, he realized, was more than enough. Saturday arrived with that golden sunlight that only shows up in late fall, warm in appearance but not in touch, illuminating the dry leaves on the lawns without melting the thin layer of frost. Warren woke up early, as he often did now, but instead of opening his laptop and checking emails, he decided to make pancakes for breakfast. They still weren't perfect. Some came out slightly burned at the edges, others a bit raw in the middle, but they were edible, which was a major accomplishment for a man who, until a few weeks ago, barely knew where the pots and pans were stored in his own kitchen. "Jenna," he called from the foot of the stairs. "Breakfast is ready." He heard light, quick footsteps, and soon Jenna appeared at the top, still in her pajamas, her brown hair a messy halo around her face. Lucy, the rag doll, was cradled in her arms as usual. "Morning," she said, heading down and sitting at the table. "Morning." "I made pancakes." Warren placed a plate in front of her, watching proudly as she smiled at the imperfect shapes. "They look nice." "They're better," Warren corrected, taking a seat across from her. "Not nice yet, but better." They ate in a comfortable silence for a few minutes. That was their rhythm now. Silences were no longer loaded with tension, just natural pauses when words weren't needed. "I was thinking," Warren said, taking another pancake for himself. "We could do something different today. Maybe go out." Jenna looked up from her plate, intrigued. "What kind of outing?" "We could visit the mall. There's a new toy store on the 2nd floor. Then maybe grab lunch somewhere, see a movie. Whatever you'd like." Her eyes lit up. "Can I bring Lucy?" "Of course. I'm sure she'll enjoy seeing other toys." An hour later, they were in the car, heading to the mall. Jenna wore a light blue dress that matched Lucy's. Warren watched them both out of the corner of his eye while driving, noticing how Jenna whispered to the doll, explaining where they were going and what they would see. It was funny how something so simple could feel so significant now, a Saturday trip to the mall, something thousands of parents did with their children every weekend. But for Warren, it was a milestone. He couldn't recall the last time he'd done something like this with Tyson. There had always been a more important meeting, a more urgent project. The mall was crowded, as expected on a Saturday. Warren led Jenna up the escalators to the second floor, where the new toy store boasted a bright and welcoming facade. "Wow," Jenna whispered upon entering, her eyes sweeping over shelves packed with every possible toy. "Where do you want to start?" Warren asked. Jenna clutched Lucy to her chest, momentarily overwhelmed by the sheer number of choices. "I'm not sure. There's so much. Let's just look around then." "Say, what's here?" They wandered through the aisles, pausing to examine board games, stuffed animals, and puzzles. Jenna showed interest in everything, but didn't linger too long, until they reached the doll section. Her eyes settled on a larger doll than Lucy, with brown hair that could be styled, and clothes that could be changed. "Do you like that one?" Warren asked, noticing her interest. Jenna nodded timidly. "She looks like me, and like Lucy, too. They could be sisters." Warren smiled. "Do you want to get her?" "Can I?" The genuine surprise in her voice still tugged at his heart, like gifts were something utterly rare in her life. "Yes. That's why we're here." Jenna carefully picked up the doll, studying every detail of its face, the outfit, the tiny shoes. She can be Lucy's big sister, she decided. They kept moving through the store, now with the new doll, whom Jenna decided to name Olivia, alongside Lucy in her arms. Then, as they passed the section with toy cars, Warren stopped abruptly. There, on the third shelf, was a bright red remote control car. Not exactly the same, but incredibly similar to the one he'd bought for Tyson on his last birthday, a gift the boy had barely gotten to use before falling ill. "You okay?" Jenna asked, noticing his pause. Warren blinked, returning to the present. "Yeah. It's just, Tyson had a car like this." Jenna looked at the toy with renewed interest. "Did he like it?" "He loved it. It was red, just like this. Red was always his favorite color." Warren picked up the car, examining it with a mix of nostalgia and sadness. He used to play in the backyard, making obstacle courses with rocks and sticks. The memory was bittersweet, but more sweet than bitter, Warren realized with some surprise. Before, any memory of Tyson stabbed him with almost physical pain. Now there was also warmth, a gratitude for having had those moments at all. "We could buy it too," Jenna suggested softly. Warren looked at her, surprised. "Would you like that?" "Yes. We could play in the backyard like he did." The simplicity of her suggestion nearly undid him. It wasn't pity he saw in Jenna's eyes, but real understanding, a desire to share not just the present, but the memories as well. "Tyson would have liked that," Warren said, placing the car under his arm. "He'd be happy watching us here," Jenna added, showing a wisdom beyond her years. Warren nodded, at a loss for words for a moment. He inhaled deeply, steadying himself. "Let's see if there's anything else you might like," he finally said, extending his free hand toward Jenna. She took it, shifting Lucy and Olivia into one arm. Together they continued browsing, now with renewed purpose. It seemed like an ordinary scene at first glance, a man and a child hand in hand in a toy store on a Saturday morning. To any casual onlooker, they were just another dad and daughter out shopping. But for Warren and Jenna, and perhaps even for Tyson's spirit, gently hovering over them, it was so much more. It was the proof that people can change, that hearts hardened by grief can soften again, that it's never too late to become the father, the man, the human being one should have been from the start. In that bright, bustling toy store, there were no fireworks or angelic choirs to signal a grand epiphany. Just a man holding a child's hand, carrying a red toy car under his arm, smiling a smile that finally reached his eyes. It might seem small, but it was everything. Warren Hale, the renowned architect who built skyscrapers that touched the clouds, had finally constructed something infinitely more valuable. A second chance, a home, a family. He had at last become the man his son had always known he could be. Days went by one after the other, without major events, just small shared moments that, added together, turned a house into a home. Routine, once an empty burden to both, now carried weight and color. Mornings started with breakfast together. Warren had finally mastered the art of pancakes and occasionally tried his hand at omelets, sometimes to Jenna's amusement. Their conversations flowed easily, with no lingering tension or fear of saying the wrong thing. "There's a field trip next week," Jenna mentioned one morning, spreading jam on her toast. "We're going to the Science Museum." "Sounds fun," Warren said. "Do you need a signed permission slip?" "Yeah, and they also asked for a parent chaperone." "Volunteers." Warren looked up from his coffee cup. "Would you like me to go?" The smile she gave him was all the answer he needed. Evenings meant dinner at the kitchen table, no longer in awkward silence, but sharing stories of the day. Warren had shifted more of his work to home, arranging meetings so he could pick Jenna up from school. Robert adapted well to the changes, realizing a more balanced Warren was a more effective professional. After dinner, sometimes they watched a movie, other times they played board games, Risk, Monopoly, Clue, all of which Warren had bought on impulse one afternoon. Jenna always won at Clue. Her sharp mind made connections that surprised him. "You should be a detective when you grow up," he joked after yet another defeat. "Nah," Jenna replied seriously. "I want to build things, like you and Tyson." Warren felt that familiar ache in his chest, but it was warm now, pride and tenderness mixed together. On weekends, they tended the backyard. Warren had never been into gardening. He used to hire a service to keep the lawn neat and the plants alive. But Jenna was interested, so soon they were planting flowers, herbs, even a small tomato plant. "My grandma said taking care of plants teaches patience," Jenna explained, patting soil around a newly planted geranium. "So your grandma was a wise woman," Warren said, watching her small hands work. Music also returned to the house. One night, while rummaging through a forgotten shelf, Warren found an old jazz record. He hadn't played music in a long time, associating it with painful memories of Tyson, who loved classic rock that Warren used to play on rare Sundays. "What's that?" Jenna asked, seeing the record in his hands. "Music," Warren replied, blowing dust off the cover. "John Coltrane. It belonged to my father." With some difficulty, he found the old record player in the basement and set it up in the living room. When the needle hit the vinyl and the first saxophone notes filled the room, the atmosphere changed. The house, which for so long had been just a space, gained a new dimension. That night, Warren told Jenna stories about his own father, how he used to play sax in his spare time, how he collected jazz records. He also spoke about Tyson, about how the boy used to sit on the living room rug listening to Pink Floyd or Led Zeppelin with his dad on those rare free Sundays. "At least he had good taste in music," Warren joked. He was surprised to find himself smiling while talking about his son, not with that crushing sadness as before, but with a gentle longing. Jenna smiled more too. Her face, once constantly serious, lit up as she shared stories about school or jokes she learned from friends, or whenever she discovered something new. Her laughter, once as rare as rain in the desert, now echoed through the house regularly. On a random Tuesday, driving back from a brief office visit, Warren had an idea. He stopped by a pet store and returned home with a small aquarium and 2 goldfish. "For you to take care of," he said, seeing Jenna's eyes widen. "I figured they could live in your room." Her joy was so genuine and complete that Warren felt a lump in his throat. How could something so simple and ordinary mean so much? That same night, after Jenna was asleep, Warren climbed the stairs to his own room. As usual, he paused in front of Tyson's closed door at the end of the hall. But this time, his hand on the doorknob didn't tremble. The weight on his chest wasn't so suffocating. He was ready. With a smooth turn, he opened the door for the first time in over a year. The scent hit him first. That familiar mix of Tyson's smell, colored pencils, and the superhero deodorant he insisted on wearing even though he was still so young. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. The bed neatly made, toys arranged on shelves, drawings on the walls. Warren stepped inside carefully, as if walking on sacred ground. He touched the desk where Tyson did his homework, the bookshelf full of adventure novels. the collection of toy cars meticulously lined up. On the nightstand sat a framed photo of Warren and Tyson at an amusement park, both grinning after a roller coaster ride. He remembered that day, one of the rare times he'd cancelled a commitment to spend time with his son. Warren sat on the edge of the bed, holding the photo frame. Tears welled up, but they felt different this time. They weren't tears of despair or guilt, just longing. Love. "It's okay, son," he whispered to the silent room. "You're still here." And he was. Tyson lived on, not just in that room, but throughout the house, in Jenna's smiles, in the stories they shared, in the music playing again, in the garden that was starting to grow. The pain hadn't disappeared, and maybe it never would, but it had transformed into something else, something he could live with. A love reshaped, no longer destructive, but constructive. Warren spent hours there, sifting through boxes, looking at old drawings, reading school notebooks. He found the box of newspaper clippings Jenna had mentioned, articles about his projects that Tyson had carefully collected, arranged by date, some with little comments in childish handwriting. "Dad on TV. Tallest building in town. Dad is awesome." When he finally left the room, he left the door open. It was time for fresh air and sunlight to flow in, time for life to return to that space. The next day, he told Jenna he had opened Tyson's room and asked if she wanted to see it. She nodded solemnly, understanding the significance. Together, they explored the room that had once belonged to Tyson. Jenna touched his toys reverently, browsed the books, and smiled at the drawings. "He drew really well," she commented, looking at a rocket illustration he had made. "Like you," Warren replied. In the days that followed, the dynamic between them changed subtly. It was as if the last barrier had fallen. Jenna began spending time in Tyson's room, sometimes drawing at his desk, sometimes just sitting on the bed, talking to her dolls, or reading one of his adventure books. Warren didn't mind. In fact, it comforted him to see the room in use again, filled with new life. Tyson would have liked that, he was sure. One morning, about 2 weeks after the door had been opened, Jenna came to breakfast wearing a mysterious smile. "I have a surprise," she announced, "but it won't be ready until this afternoon. You'll be home, right?" "I will," Warren said, intrigued. "Any hint about this surprise?" "It's a performance, in the backyard." 4 o'clock, she said cryptically. Then, after a pause, "Just the two of us." All day, Warren watched Jenna darting in and out of the backyard, hauling art supplies, colored fabric, even some folding chairs. She refused any help, insisting she had to do it all herself. At 4 sharp, Warren appeared in the backyard, wearing the dress shirt and neatly pressed pants Jenna had requested. He found a single chair placed in front of a makeshift stage made of cardboard boxes draped with a white sheet. A sign, painted in bright letters, read, "The girl who found a dad." "Have a seat," Jenna instructed, emerging from behind a tree. She wore a dress Warren didn't recognize, probably something she'd crafted herself from scraps of fabric layered over her usual clothes. Warren did as told, both curious and touched by her dedication. Once he sat down, Jenna turned on a small radio she'd set up. Soft instrumental music began to play, likely borrowed from the old records they'd rediscovered. The performance began. With endearing seriousness, Jenna acted out the story of a girl who lost everything, who lived alone, who'd given up on expecting anything from life. She used mime, exaggerated expressions, and movements that resembled an improvised modern dance. The story progressed, showing how she met a sad man in a cemetery, moved into a big cold house and still felt alone despite living with him. Warren felt a lump in his throat, recognizing their own story through Jenna's eyes. Then came the moment of her escape, their reunion in the park, her return home. And finally, the real transformation. The house filling with color, laughter returning, plants blooming in the yard, music resounding in once silent rooms. The finale depicted the girl and the man tending a garden together, planting a small tree that grew until it touched the sky. Above them was a red-headed boy, portrayed by a drawing Jenna held overhead, smiling down at them from the sky. When the music stopped, Jenna took a formal bow, her face serious despite the blush on her cheeks from the effort. Warren applauded, tears streaming freely down his face. He had never seen anything so simple, yet so profound, so honest. Jenna approached, sitting on the grass at Warren's feet. "Did you like it?" she asked, the childlike insecurity returning after her confident performance. "It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Jenna smiled, relieved. Then, gazing at the sky where the first stars were starting to appear, she said, "Tyson would be happy." Warren looked up, imagining his son watching from somewhere, maybe perched on a particularly soft cloud, maybe shining from a particularly bright star. "So am I," he answered, swallowing hard. They sat there on the grass, watching the daylight fade into evening. They didn't need big words or grand gestures anymore. The simplest things had gained immeasurable value. A shared silence, hands joined, a silent certainty that, no matter what, they were together now. A family, not by blood or obligation, but by choice, by love. December 12th dawned bright and perfect, as if it were a gift from the sky. Warren woke up early, long before usual, a pleasant anxiety pulsing through him. He moved quietly around the house, careful not to wake Jenna. This was her day, and everything had to be perfect. In the living room, he hung clusters of balloons in her favorite colors, blue and yellow, from the ceiling and walls. In the kitchen, Mrs. Reynolds was already baking the chocolate cake with strawberry frosting Jenna had mentioned weeks ago. Soon, the decorator arrived with floral arrangements, and the caterers with covered trays, soda bottles, and tubs of ice cream. The house, once cold and lifeless, was now transforming into a place of celebration. Before waking Jenna, Warren stopped at Tyson's room, now always open. The space had changed over the last few months. It still held Tyson's belongings, but now it had new elements. Jenna's drawings hung beside Tyson's, her books sat next to his on the shelves, and the red remote-control car they had bought was displayed in a place of honor. It was no longer an untouched shrine, but a living space, where Tyson's memory coexisted with Jenna's presence. Smiling, Warren went to Jenna's room and tapped softly on the door. "You awake?" The door opened to reveal Jenna in her pajamas, her hair messy but her eyes bright and alert. "Morning," she said. "Today's the day, right?" "It is," Warren confirmed, handing her a rectangular gift wrapped in silver paper with a fancy bow. "Happy birthday, Jenna." She took the present with great care, opening it gently without tearing the paper. Inside was a leather-bound photo album in her favorite shade of blue, with her name embossed on the cover. On the first page was a recent picture of the two of them in the backyard. On the second page, an older photo of Tyson and Jenna at the park, found among Tyson's things. The rest of the pages were blank, waiting for new memories. "For us to start our own family album," Warren explained. "There's plenty of space to fill." Jenna ran her fingers over the cover, then hugged Warren tightly. "Thank you." "There's more," he said, gesturing to a larger box by the bed. Inside, she found a light blue dress, simple, delicate, and brand new. Jenna held it up in awe. "It's for you to wear today," Warren said, "for your party." Jenna's eyes widened. "Party? There's a party. Of course, it's your birthday. Birthdays deserve parties." A slow smile spread across her face. "Who's coming?" "Mrs. Reynolds, Robert and his wife, the neighbors in the yellow house with the twin girls, your friends from school, your art teacher you like so much." Jenna looked stunned. "All that are for me." Warren nodded, feeling a pang at the realization that, at 10 years old, a birthday party was something completely new to her. "Is there a cake?" she asked in a small voice. "Chocolate with strawberry frosting and ice cream too." Jenna hugged the dress to her chest, her eyes shining. "Thank you," she said again, finding no other words. "Go get dressed," Warren said, kissing the top of her head. "Guests start arriving at noon." Right at noon, the doorbell started to ring. In no time, the house was full. Kids running around the backyard, adults chatting in small groups, upbeat music playing in the background. A normal birthday party to many, but extraordinary to someone who'd never had one. Jenna drifted among the guests in her new blue dress, moving with an almost adult-like grace. She accepted gifts with genuine gratitude, talked politely with grown-ups, and played with the other children. Yet there were moments when Warren caught her standing to the side, watching everything with wonder, as if she couldn't believe it was all for her. During one such moment, he approached her. Jenna stood a little apart, watching the kids bounce in the inflatable castle he'd rented. "Enjoying the party?" Warren asked. "It's the most incredible thing that's ever happened to me," she said, with absolute sincerity. Warren smiled, that familiar warmth blossoming in his chest, a mix of joy for giving her this experience and sadness for knowing it was all new to her. "I've never had this before," Jenna murmured, gazing at the party as if it were a fragile dream. Warren got down on one knee beside her so they were eye level and pulled her into a firm hug. "You'll have it from now on," he promised, voice quivering. "Every year." Jenna hugged him back, resting her face against his shoulder. When they finally pulled apart, she wore a smile, full and unguarded, the kind of smile he'd worked so hard to bring back since the day they met. "Go on," he urged. "It's your party." He watched her run off to join her friends, the blue dress fluttering like butterfly wings behind her. Then he looked around at his once empty house, now filled with life. What he saw went beyond decorations and guests. He saw a new beginning, a second chance. A new life built on the foundations of two people shaped by loss, but now defined by what they found in each other. He remembered where they started. Him, a man broken by guilt and grief, unable to open his son's bedroom door. Her, a lonely child used to not being seen, to not mattering, and now they were celebrating together. She was surrounded by friends and presents. He was able to smile again, able to think of Tyson with love instead of just pain. The once closed door now stood open, the room filled with light and renewed life. "Time for cake," Mrs. Reynolds called, placing the chocolate cake in the middle of the living room. 10 candles flickering like little beacons. Everyone sang happy birthday while Jenna beamed. "Make a wish," Warren said. Jenna closed her eyes for a moment, then blew hard, putting out all the candles at once. Applause broke out, and soon the cake was being sliced and passed around. "What did you wish for?" Warren asked when they had a quiet moment alone. Jenna smiled, a smile far too wise for a 10-year-old. "I can't tell you, or else it won't come true." Warren nodded, respecting her secret, but somehow, looking at her radiant face, at the vibrant house and the open future, he suspected he already knew, and that was it. 2 pasts marked by loss, 2 presents filled with love, a new life built with patience and presence. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. Pain and longing still showed up at unexpected times. Tyson remained an absence felt daily. But now there was room for more, for laughter alongside tears, hope alongside longing, a future finally worth living. Warren surveyed the party around him. More than just a birthday celebration. It was a celebration of something he'd once believed impossible, that happiness was still within reach, that broken hearts could mend, that families could be rebuilt in unexpected ways from the Shard's tragedy left behind. He looked at Jenna, surrounded by her friends, carefully cutting her birthday cake with ceremonious pride, and felt an absolute certainty. Whatever wish she'd made blowing out those candles, he would do everything in his power to make it come true. Because that's what parents do. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.